Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, the what, why and how of newspaper analysis from the perspective of civil services examination. Today we have taken up Delhi edition of The Hindu newspaper dated 30th of March 2023. Before we begin with the discussion, there is an important announcement. All of you who want to practice the answer writing, you have an opportunity because the weekly question has been uploaded on the eLearn platform. The question for this week deals with the Comptroller and Auditor General of India. All those who will upload your answers before Saturday will get it evaluated from the faculties of Rao's IAS. Let us now begin the discussion. First topic for discussion has appeared on the front page. Civic polls unlikely in Nagaland after move to repeal Act. So the Nagaland Assembly has unanimously resolved to repeal the Nagaland Municipality Act of 2001, thereby negating the possibility of the state holding elections to the urban local bodies with 33% of the seats reserved for women. Now, if you have the idea of basics of the Constitution and if you have read 73rd Amendment to the Constitution of India, which deals with the local body in rural areas, you must have read that it is mandatory for all the states to enact and implement the provisions of 73rd Constitutional Amendment, whereas Nagaland is clearly not doing so, has not done it so far. And it has still not provided the reservation, 33% reservation to women in local bodies. And since prelims examination is around the corner, this is one of the most important topics from the point of view of prelims examination. Now, the reason why Nagaland was able to avoid a constitutional provision directly lies in Article 243M of the Constitution, which clearly said part not to apply to certain areas, which says that nothing in this part shall apply to scheduled areas referred to in Clause 1 and the tribal areas referred to in Clause 2 of 244, which are basically Schedule 5 and Schedule 6 areas. But apart from that, nothing in this part shall also apply to Nagaland, Meghalaya and Mizoram. So you can see that at the time of the commencement of 73rd Constitutional Amendment, Nagaland was clearly not the part of this scheme because it was thought that these states are culturally so different that it is not a good idea to impose the kind of rural bodies, the kind of local bodies that we have envisaged for all the country on Nagaland. And hence the freedom was given to these states. Now it has been around 30 years. And so it is expected of Nagaland to adopt the similar provisions into their local body act as well, to which the Nagaland took a positive step, but it is now reverting back. But this is just one of the provisions. There are other provisions as well, which are very, very important from the perspective of prelims examination.
Let us have a look at two questions, and these are just two questions, but many other questions have been asked. For example, in 2016, UPSC asked, consider the following statements. The minimum age prescribed for any person to be a member of Panchayat is 25 years. A Panchayat reconstituted after premature dissolution continues only for the remainder period. Then in 2011, UPSC asked the Constitution 73rd Amendment Act 1992, which aims at promoting the Panchayati Raj institution in the country, provides for which of the following? Constitution of District Planning Committee, State Election Commissions to conduct all Panchayati elections, establishment of state finance commissions. And now let us go through the discussion from the original source, which is the Constitution of India, and see that whether these questions could be answered if you had read the Constitution of India. And starting with the very basics, and that is which part of the Constitution of India deals with the Panchayati Raj system. And if you look at the original PDF and if you scroll down, you can see part 1 deals with the union and its territories, part 2 deals with the citizenship, part 3 deals with fundamental rights. And similarly, if you scroll further down, you can see the Panchayats is dealt within part 9, which starts at Article 243 with the definitions, and then going further, part 9A deals with the municipalities. So Article 243 first defines the term which will be used in this particular part, which means what will be a district, what do you call a Gram Sabha, and it is important to know that Gram Sabha means a body consisting of persons registered in the electoral rolls relating to a village comprised within the area of Panchayat at the village level. So Gram Sabha is an inclusive body which includes everyone whose name appears in the electoral rolls. Then it defines what does it mean by intermediate level, panchayat, panchayat area, population and village. And so a village under part 9 would mean village specified by the governor by public notification. So that can also be framed as one of the options in the prelims examination. Now part 243 is very important, which says a Gram Sabha may exercise such powers and perform such functions at the village level as the legislature of a state may by law provide. And this is one of the biggest problem with the delegation of the powers to the local level, because the constitution uses a very important word may, and it does not use a word shall. And so that is where the freedom has been given to the state governments to enable the Gram Sabha to exercise function. Then Article 243b deals with the constitution of panchayats, and the constitution mandates that there shall be. And now note here that the word shall has been used. There shall be constituted in every state panchayat at village, intermediate and district level in accordance with the provisions of this part. As far as panchayats at intermediate level is concerned, they may not be constituted in state having a population not exceeding 20 lakhs. So all those states which have population less than 20 lakhs may not have intermediate level of panchayats. They can only do with the village and the district level. But those two are mandatory. Now what about the composition of panchayats? Then Article 243c deals with composition of panchayats. That the legislature of a state may by law make provisions with respect to the composition of the panchayats. But all those laws shall be subject to the provisions of this part. But it puts a condition even there, that the ratio between the population of a territorial area of a panchayat at any level and the number of seats in such panchayat to be filled by election shall, as far as practicable, be same throughout the state. So take any level, let's say take a district level. And so if there is a district 1 which has 100 seats for 1 lakh population, so which means that per seat has around 1000 people, and so this particular ratio shall be same in any other district of the same state. And the second important provision of Article 243 is that all the seats in a panchayat shall be filled by persons chosen by direct election from territorial constituencies in panchayat area. So this is a very important provision, that all the seats in panchayats shall be filled by persons chosen by direct election from the people. And for this purpose, for this election, the panchayat area shall be divided into smaller constituencies. That is very commonsensical, and again, the same rule of ratio shall be followed throughout the state. Then the third provision says the legislature of a state may by law provide for the representation of, and so this provision deals with some other people who may not be directly elected by the people for the representation. And who are these people? The chairpersons of panchayat at village level, at the intermediate level. So there are 3 levels of panchayats in most states. We have village level, we have intermediate level, and then we have district level. So the chairpersons of village level might be represented in intermediate level, and similarly the chairpersons of panchayats at intermediate level may get a seat at district level. It also provides for provisions so that the members of House of People and members of Legislative Assembly of the state whose constituencies partially or wholly lie in panchayat area may also get representation. But all these things are not mandatory. Only if the state laws provides for such kind of provision, only then it can be implemented. Then similarly, not only the members of House of People and members of Legislative Assembly, but also the members of Council of States and the members of Legislative Council of the state can get the representation at the intermediate and the district level, but only at the place where they are registered as electors. Then the question arises, and a very important one, that how will the chairperson of a panchayat at various levels will be elected? And so the chairperson of panchayat at village level shall be elected in such a manner as the legislature of a state may by law provide. So the constitution does not provide for any fixed format to be followed throughout the country. But the chairperson of a panchayat at the intermediate level or district level shall be elected by and from amongst the elected members of the panchayat itself. As far as village level is concerned, states have the freedom to follow different kinds of formats. But for chairperson at intermediate and district level, the constitution uses the word shall, and hence it is mandatory that all of them shall be elected from and amongst the members themselves. Then we know that it also provides for reservation of seats for scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, and that is being done in Article 243D. And then it also provides for the reservation of the women. Then it also talks about duration of panchayats in Article 243E. And it says, every panchayat, unless sooner dissolved under any law for the time being in force, shall continue for 5 years from the date appointed for its first meeting and no longer. And it says that an election to constitute a panchayat shall be completed before the expiry of its duration specified in clause 1, which means before the expiry of the 5 years, or before the expiration of a period of 6 months from the date of its dissolution. So in a normal course, every 5 years you would expect panchayat election. But if a panchayat is dissolved before 5 years, let's say in 3.5 years, then the next elections have to be conducted within 6 months of the dissolution. And then a very important clause 4 says a panchayat constituted upon the dissolution of a panchayat before the expiration of its duration shall continue only for the remainder of the period for which the dissolved panchayat would have continued. So let us understand this with an example. If a panchayat is constituted in 2020, and let's say if it is dissolved in 2023, so the normal course would have been till 2025, that is the period of 5 years. But if it is dissolved in 2023, which means that the remainder period is 2 years, and so when a new panchayat is formed, it will continue only for a period of 2 years. And that is one of the options which was given in the prelims question which we have shown in the first slide. Then there are various conditions which have been set by the constitution for the disqualification for the membership of a panchayat. So if a person is disqualified for being a member of legislature of the state, then that automatically disqualifies her for being the member of panchayat as well. And also the state have the power to enact laws to disqualify people. And these are constitutional provisions. And now comes the most important part, that is powers, authority and responsibility of the panchayats. And again, the constitution does the minor tweaking with the word, and it uses the word may. It says, the legislature of a state may by law endow the panchayats with such powers and authority as may be necessary to enable them to function as institutions of self-government. And this is where the problem lies. Constitution does not mandate the delegation of power. It puts it to the jurisdiction or to the discretion of various states. And so the states can enact laws to delegate various powers which they have to the local government. And what are those? Preparation of plans for economic development and social justice, the implementation of schemes for economic development and social justice as may be entrusted to them, including those in relation to the matters listed in 11th schedule. So these are the two powers which can be given to the local governments by the state legislature or by the state government. Then the constitution also provides for the powers like imposition of taxes or funds by the panchayats, and again the state legislature of a state may by law and not shall by law. And so the state legislature can pass laws through which they can authorize a panchayat to levy, collect and appropriate taxes, duties, tolls, fees as have been provided in their laws. They can also assign to a panchayat taxes, duties, tolls and fee levied and collected by the state government for various purposes. They can also provide for making such grants in aid to the panchayats from the consolidated fund of the state, and they can also provide for constitution of such funds for crediting all money received respectively by or on behalf of the panchayats, and also provide for withdrawal of such monies. But if you look at the actual powers which the panchayats possess right now, there is a lot of variation in that. Some states panchayats have a lot of power as far as taxes and duties are concerned, but there are some states where panchayats do not have practically any kind. Then wherever there is a devolution fund, there is a finance commission. And so just like we have a finance commission provided by Article 280 at the central level to enable the vertical devolution of funds from center to states, we have state finance commissions, which is provided by Article 243I. And just like Article 280 provides for the constitution of finance commission through precedent, here the governor of a state, as soon as may be at the expiration of every 5th year, constitute a finance commission to review the financial position of panchayats and to make recommendation to the governor as to the principles which should govern the distribution of various kinds of net proceeds of taxes, duties and tolls between the state and the panchayats, the principles which will determine the taxes, duties and tolls which may be assigned or appropriated by the panchayats. Principles which will determine the grants in aid to the panchayats from the consolidated fund of the state. And also it will suggest the measures which are needed to improve the financial position of the panchayats. And then of course governor may refer any other financial matter to the finance commission. An important aspect of this particular provision is that there is no fixed criteria as to the qualification and the composition of the finance commission, which will be determined by the state legislature by law. So the state legislature of a state may by law provide for the composition of the commission, the qualifications which shall be requisite for appointment as members thereof, and the manner in which they shall be selected, and then what shall be done with that report. So the governor shall cause every recommendation made by the commission under this article together with an explanatory memorandum as to action taken thereon to be laid before the legislature of the state. So finance commission will recommend something, and along with those recommendations, an action taken report as to how many recommendations were agreed by the state government, how many recommendations were not agreed, and if not, why not, all these things shall be laid before the legislature. Then as far as auditing of the accounts of panchayat is concerned, again the state legislature shall make laws regarding that. And then comes that provision because of which we are discussing the whole constitutional provision, and that is related to elections to the panchayats, which is dealt with in Article 243K, which says the superintendent's direction and control of the preparation of electoral rolls for and the conduct of all elections to panchayat shall be vested in State Election Commission consisting of a State Election Commissioner to be appointed by the governor. Then what are the securities or the guarantees provided to the Election Commission? That is given in clause 2. Subject to the provision of any law made by the legislature of a state, the conditions of service and tenure of office of the State Election Commissioner shall be such as the governor may by rule determine. But provided that the State Election Commissioner shall not be removed from his office except in like manner and on the like grounds as a judge of High Court. So although the states have power to legislate the terms and conditions and tenure of the office of a State Election Commissioner, but his or her removal has been specified by the Constitution, and that has to be on the grounds and on like manner of a judge of a High Court. And the condition of service of a State Election Commissioner shall not be varied to his disadvantage after his appointment. So these are the securities being given to the State Election Commissioner. So these are the important provisions of Part 9 of the Constitution of India, which deals with panchayat. Some of the important articles which you should remember from the perspective of both prelims as well as mains examination is Article 243B, which deals with the constitution of panchayat, Article 243C, which deals with the composition of panchayats, Article 243D, which deals with the reservation of seats, then Article 243G, which deals with the powers, authority and responsibility of the panchayats, and Article 243H, which deals with powers to impose taxes and funds by the panchayats, and finally Article 243K, which deals with the elections to the panchayats. Now whenever you have to quote the deficiencies in our panchayat system, you can say one of the deficiencies is that Constitution does not mandate the delegation of the power as stated in Article 243G and H, where the Constitution uses the word may rather than shall. Now after having this discussion on the constitutional provision, check for yourself whether you were able to solve these two questions which have been asked in the prelims examination or not. And let us now move on to the next discussion.
The next article that we have taken up has appeared on the business page. SEBI pushes norms to ensure better disclosures boost transparency. And so the Securities and Exchange Board of India yesterday has decided to improve disclosure norms and transparency by mandating that large listed companies must confirm or deny price-sensitive market rumors, and in the case of important board decisions, disclose them to exchanges within 30 minutes. And this has been done to ensure transparency so that the shareholders' money is preserved and protected. Now in last 3 months, mainly because of the Hindenburg report, where apart from a lot of allegations, one of the allegations was that the Adani group had followed some unfair market practices which did not come under the radar of SEBI, have been beneficial to artificially inflate the share prices of Adani Enterprises and other sister concerns, has brought the functioning of SEBI into the news. And so it becomes extremely important topic from the perspective of both prelims as well as mains.
Now, as far as the prelims examination is concerned, we know that it is an examination based on mainly on information. And so, whether it is a statutory body or not, what are its functions, what are its main tasks and objectives would suffice. But when it comes to the mains examination, we can see that under GS paper 2, statutory, regulatory and various quasi-judicial bodies is a part of your syllabus. And SEBI, just like RBI, PFRDA, is a regulatory body. It's a body which has been created to regulate the securities market in the country. And hence, we are going to first understand the basic stuff, and then we are going to understand what are the issues which is being faced by SEBI. So SEBI, or the Securities and Exchange Board of India, was constituted initially, of course, as a non-statutory body, which means that it did not have any legislation or an act to back its existence, and this was mainly in the year 1988. So that was the first time when the government felt that there is a need to regulate the securities or the share market. And it was mainly through a resolution of Government of India, which we don't need to know, because 4 years down the line, the Securities and Exchange Board of India Act 1992 was created. And hence, if the question or one of the options in the prelims examination is that whether SEBI is a statutory body or not, it is indeed a statutory body, because it is created and it is regulated through an act. And so the basic function of SEBI is to protect the interests of investors in the securities and to promote the development of and to regulate the securities market. It consists, of course, of a board, and the board has one chairman. Of course, currently it would be chairperson, chairwoman, Madhabi Puri. But apart from the chairman, it has 4 full-time members. And apart from 4 full-time members, it has 4 part-time members. And so you can see that at any point of time, there would be 9 members of SEBI at any point of time. Apart from that, there is an entity known as Security Appellate Tribunal, which is also a statutory body, by the way, which was established under the provision of Section 15 of the SEBI Act, and hence it is also a statutory body to hear and dispose of appeals against the orders passed by SEBI. So SEBI is a regulatory body, and if you are not satisfied with the orders of SEBI, you can go to Securities Appellate Tribunal to challenge the decision of SEBI. So when we talk about the functions, its functions can be broadly categorized into developmental functions and regulatory functions. Now, of course, when there is a regulator, the job of the regulator is to enthuse a sense of confidence in the market or in the area where the regulator is trying to regulate. And this is, of course, the securities market. And hence, it is, when it comes to the development, its job is to train intermediaries and to promote trading in security market. For example, in past decades, SEBI has allowed internet trading. It has made underwriting optional. It has also allowed the equities to go dematerialized, which are known as demat accounts, to trade electronically. So these are the active roles which have been played by the SEBI. But apart from that, when you come to the main function, it is the regulation of the securities market. So for example, it is mandatory for the brokers to register themselves with SEBI before becoming a broker or a sub-broker, share transfer agents, trustees, merchant bankers. Apart from that, it is necessary for the mutual funds to register themselves and come under the regulation of SEBI. Apart from that, when we talk about intermediaries, it has developed a code of conduct for them so that they can operate in full transparency. And apart from that, it takes care of audit of stock exchanges and regulation of takeover of companies. But then, as the recent events suggest, that SEBI is facing considerable amount of challenges as well. Although SEBI's regulations are laws, but the process through which regulations are drafted, neither regulation making nor post-mortem analysis of regulation is shaped by any evidence. And so, the challenges faced by SEBI can be mainly categorized as enforcement process issues, talent pool and market intelligence issues, deepening capital market issues, corporate debt and securitization issues, matching up to global standard issues, and negatively charged issues. So for example, SEBI has made various regulations and issued orders as a civil court. But only making regulations and giving orders is not enough if it is not able to enforce the same. SEBI needs to strengthen its surveillance and enforcement functions. And it also at the same time needs to ensure that violations do not go unnoticed, whether small or large. And so we can say that its enforcement process is very, very weak. Apart from that, in 2012, SEBI had around 643 employees, whereas the US Security and Exchange Commission alone had around 1,000 employees. As we all know, human resource is the most important resource for an organization. SEBI needs to increase its human resource in both quality as well as quantity. It needs to significantly improve its market intelligence, technology and talent pool in order to improve its performance. And so we can say that currently it is deficit of talent pool as well as market intelligence. But it does not just ends there. The number of participants in the capital market has not risen much, which was the main task of SEBI. The reason why the government decided to regulate the market or the securities market, the share market, was because of the fact that people did not trust the share markets enough. And if people are not trusting the share markets, they are not going to invest in public companies. And so where is the investment going to come from? And hence, we see as an indicator of lack of confidence that the number of participants in the capital market has not risen much. Of course, during the time of COVID, we saw an upsurge in the number of participants, but it has dipped after that. Still, a large section of society does not deal in the security market. SEBI has done, of course, a lot to encourage people to participate in the capital market, such as abolishing entry load on mutual funds, simplifying KYC norms. But it needs to take some stronger steps to deepen participation in capital market. Apart from that, despite numerous attempts, the debt market volume has increased, but it has failed to attract sufficient liquidity. And hence, the regulator needs to develop a vibrant corporate debt market and securitization market, but these largely remain part of the over-the-counter market. Another issue which the SEBI is facing, that the practices which it is adopting is not up to the level of global standards. And so there is a need for SEBI to learn from the world's best practices and adopt them so that we are on the same page as compared to the world best. And finally, just like any other institution, the effectiveness of institution more often than not depends upon the people who populate the institution. And SEBI's appointment process has always been criticized. Allegations of corruptions by SEBI staff are frequently heard. The accountability mechanisms that envelop SEBI are quite poor, and it is very important to make the recruitment process fair and transparent. The next news has appeared on page number 6. How to manage India's photovoltaic waste problem. Can photovoltaic raw materials be recovered or recycled? How can the country improve photovoltaic waste management? So this article raises concern that India is now going to invest massively in renewable energy, and within renewable energy, India is going to invest massively and rely mainly on the solar cells because it wants to harness the solar energy. On one hand, it is a good thing that India is relying heavily on solar energy, but on the other, it raises concern as to how India is going to dispose of this massive semiconductor log that India is creating. And hence, in this regard, we are going to have this discussion. So, as far as photovoltaic devices are concerned, it is basically, you can say that they are a type of e-waste generated by discarded solar panels and photovoltaic devices. And we know that they contain semiconductor. It's exactly because of the semiconductor that we are able to convert the solar energy into the chemical energy and finally deriving electrical energy from that. And so a single PV device is known as cell, of course, and these cells are connected together in chains to form larger units known as modules or panels, as you can see on the screen. And when we talk about these devices, although up to 90% of the components are recyclable, Many photovoltaic modules contain heavy metals such as cadmium, copper, lead, antimony, selenium, and when they are taken out of service or broken, they may be classified as hazardous waste, and hence there is a need for us to focus upon the waste management of photovoltaic devices. And so, as far as the present status of photovoltaic waste in India is concerned, according to a report by National Solar Energy Federation, India could generate over 34,600 tons of cumulative solar waste by 2030. India currently considers solar waste a part of electronic waste and does not account it separately. So there is no separate calculation of how much of the waste is coming from photovoltaic devices. Moreover, there is no commercial raw material recovery facility for solar e-waste which is operational in India right now. When we talk about challenges, there are four main challenges, starting with, of course, informal handling. Only about 20% of the waste that is recovered in general, the rest is treated informally. So 80% of the waste is being treated and recovered informally, not in the organized sector, and as a result, the waste often accumulates at landfills, which of course pollute the surroundings. Now, if you do not want to recover anything and if you burn it in incinerators, the release contains sulfur oxides, hydrogen fluoride, and hydrogen cyanide into the atmosphere. Apart from that, there is complete lack of segregation. Photovoltaic waste is clubbed along with e-waste, as we have seen, and it is a big problem. It is a big problem because e-waste generally should contain the digital devices like mobile phones, television sets, chips, laptops. They contain a lot more semiconductors and circuits. And if we are treating e-waste same as photovoltaic devices, it's an injustice to both of them. It's a gross mismanagement of the resources, because if you consider how much of the resources, how much of the heavy metals and semiconductors can be recovered, it's just going, all of it is just becoming a waste. And so the cost of recycling in India is very high. Recycling a solar panel costs around $20, anywhere between $20 to $30, according to the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, whereas sending it to landfill costs just $1. And finally, there is of course a gross lack of incentives. The market to repurpose or reuse recycled photovoltaic waste is minuscule in India due to a lack of suitable incentive and schemes in which businesses can invest, and hence in India most of the photovoltaic cells are treated as e-waste, out of which 20% is going to formal sector, rest 80% is going to informal sector, or it is just ending up in landfills. And so, as a way forward, we can say that there is a need to promote recycling, because according to a 2021 report, approximately 50% of the total materials can be recovered. The domestic development of photovoltaic waste recycling technologies must be promoted through appropriate infrastructure facilities and adequate funding. Apart from that, we need dedicated policy formulation of solar waste that could be part of the power purchase agreement which is signed with discoms. So basically, power purchase agreements are signed between the distribution companies and the producers of power, under which the distributors have certain arrangements and obligations to fulfill. We can obligate the producers of renewable energy to mandatorily recycle the photovoltaic cells. Then of course there is a need for complete ban on photovoltaic cells reaching the landfills. Solar panel waste is harmful to the environment, as we have seen, because it contains toxic metals and minerals that may seep in the ground, and so there is a need for complete ban on that activity. Apart from that, central insurance or regulatory body should be set up to protect against financial losses incurred in waste collection and treatment. There is also a need for research and development along with innovation in design that may have an impact on the type of waste they generate. And so new panels, for example, might use less silicon and produce less waste during manufacturing process, and hence there is a need for pan-India awareness creation or sensitization drives for the proper waste management of photovoltaic devices. The next article for today has been taken from editorial or the column appearing on page number 6. Human life above all. Opposition of doctors to the right to health comes from baseless misgivings, says the Hindu newspaper. So we know that Rajasthan legislature has recently passed Right to Health Act, and it has chosen to provide certain rights to the people of Rajasthan, and it has led to a lot of opposition, especially from the medical fraternity. The doctors, the hospitals, management, they are all up against this particular law. And of course, there are certain provisions of the bill which can be debated, but since it is a state bill, it has already been taken up in the DNS earlier as well. But coming up with such a bill always brings into the question the state of health in our country. What are the major challenges which are facing the health sector in our country? And this is important because under GS paper 2, under governance section, UPSC expects us to know issues relating to development and management of social sector, services related to health, education and human resources. So clearly you are expected to know the issues related to health. And the recent economic survey has a chapter which was dedicated completely and solely on the health issues in our country. So this discussion has been taken from there. Do listen and try to assimilate the important issues. So we all know that recent COVID-19 pandemic has emphasized the importance of the healthcare sector and its linkage with other key sectors of the economy. And we know that health of a nation depends critically on its citizens having access to an equitable, affordable and accountable healthcare system. Better health is directly reflected in the better economic growth of a country through labor productivity, declined economic burden of illness. So for example, a World Health Organization report has said that increasing life expectancy from 50 to 70 years could raise the economic growth by 1.4 percentage points per year. So these are just the economic reasons for improving the health of the economy. Of course, because this is an economic survey. But the better health of each and every individual is an end in itself and not a means to achieve something. And so a whole chapter of economic survey is dedicated to current state of affairs of India's healthcare. And it has highlighted the current issues which are plaguing India's healthcare system. And let us understand them one by one. First and foremost is, of course, India's health outcomes are very poor. As you can see, despite improvements in maternal mortality and infant mortality rate, India still needs to improve significantly on these matrices. Countries such as China, Bangladesh, Bhutan and Cambodia have improved much more in the same period of time than India. And these are just few of the indicators which we have taken. Then, India is still marred by the fact that the access to the health services and its utilization is very low in India. So hospitalization rates in India are 3 to 4%, which are among the lowest in the world. Now the same statistics for a middle income country is about 8 to 9%, and for OECD countries it is about 15 to 17%. The India is observing very high out of pocket expenditures. And as you can see in the figure, India has one of the highest levels of out of pocket expenditure in the world. If you compare, India is placed right beside Bangladesh, whereas other countries which are emerging economies, for example China and Thailand, there the amount of money which people have to shell out for hospitalization and other medical purposes is very low, and that is mainly because of low budgetary allocations for healthcare, or in other words, low public spending in health systems. We know that health is a state subject in India, and if you look at India's overall state-wise distribution of spending on healthcare, it varies drastically, and so there is a vast amount of disparity in the overall spending across India, and so that is reflected in the out-of-pocket expenditure of people belonging to various states as well. So as you can see on your screen, this graph denotes on y-axis the out-of-pocket expenditure and on the x-axis per capita state health expenditure. And so if you see, the states like Sikkim, Arunachal Pradesh and Mizoram spend a lot of amount on health, and so that is why the out-of-pocket expenditure in these states are very low. Then we have a problem of very low human resource for health, because health status of any country crucially depends on the available health infrastructure in general and human resource for health in particular. And again, just like low budgetary allocation for healthcare is dependent on the state efforts, the low human resource for health has also a state bias in it. And so the diagram which you see on your screen shows that only Kerala is a state which has adequate amount of human resource for health. Rest each and every state can be categorized into less than adequate density and less than minimum density, and most of the states in India have less than minimum density of human resource in our country. And so this also, being a state subject, has a disparity which can be explained from the point of view of state efforts. And then finally, we have a problem of unregulated private sector in healthcare, which is marked by high market failure. Now, private healthcare is important because while the share of public institutions has increased both in the number of hospitals as well as number of outpatient cares, the private sector dominates in total healthcare provision in India. And around 74% of outpatient care and 65% of overall hospitalization care is being provided through the private sector in urban India. And if you compare the cost of treatment between public and private sector for the same kind of disease, as you can see on the screen, there is a vast difference. And if you plot the same data on a state-wise and a city-wise manner, there is also a stark difference. And so that is why there is a need for a regulation. So these are the major issues plaguing our health sector. And so what is a saliency bias? Now, saliency bias is the bias of the policymakers to design the future course of action based on a recent phenomena. And so recent phenomena, which is a communicable disease, and the pandemic of this level is unlikely to strike within few years or maybe decades. And if we are able to address these issues highlighted in the economic survey, we will be better prepared to handle even these kinds of pandemic. But as the country is going through demographic transitions, there are few trends which are clearly visible, and that is the proportion of communicable and non-communicable diseases are changing in our society. So what you see on the screen is a percentage of all deaths plotted against the number of years. And so this line in the red is the number of deaths caused due to communicable maternal, neonatal and nutritional diseases. And this line in black color or dark brown color shows the number of deaths caused due to non-communicable diseases, and you can see by 2020 this forms the major share of overall deaths. And so the focus of health system of India needs to focus on non-communicable diseases, because if you leave 2020 aside, this is going to cause around 60% of overall deaths in India in future, and this is increasing. And if you break down the deaths caused due to each and every disease, if you look in 2019, the number one killer was heart disease. That has retained its position of number one. But in 2009, the disease which killed most number of people after heart disease was diarrheal disease, which is related to sanitation and infection, which is kind of communicable, has dropped down to the fourth number. Similarly, neonatal disorders have dropped down to fifth level, whereas COPD and deaths due to stroke have risen to 2, 3. So if you look, all top 3 killers are non-communicable in nature. And so that is why the economic survey lays very high emphasis on increasing public spending on health from 1% to at least 2.5% of the GDP. Increasing government spending on health has direct impact on life expectancy. And so these dots which you see on your screen are countries. And so higher the public expenditure, higher is the expectancy rate. And India is placed over here. Similarly, using the data, they also show that increasing public spending on health has negative correlation with maternal mortality rate. Higher the public spending on health, lower will be the mortality rate.
This next article for discussion has appeared on the front page. Karnataka elections on May 10, results on May 13. And so just by issuing the notification for election for the state of Karnataka, the model code of conduct has come into effect. The model of conduct, which are a set of guidelines designed by ECI and agreed by all the parties in 1968, is a very important mechanisms innovated by the Indian Election Commission to ensure that level playing field is provided to all the parties in any of the elections.
And so from the perspective of prelims examination, it is extremely pertinent for us to understand what model code of conduct is and what are the terms and conditions applicable on participants to an election and the state machinery while the model of code of conduct is in effect. So model code of conduct is a set of guidelines which have been issued by Election Commission of India. And it is basically for the conduct of political parties and candidates while the election is on, which means that it is applicable from the day of announcement of the schedule of Election Commission or schedule of the elections by the Election Commission. So yesterday, if Election Commission announced the schedule of, let's say, a state C, the model of conduct will come into force just yesterday evening. And when the results are declared by the Election Commission, the model of conduct will end. So basically, it is applicable on state machinery to provide level playing field to all the participants to the election, and it is applicable on all forms of state machinery, which we'll see pretty soon. MCC, of course, is not enforceable by law, which means that it has no legal backing. However, certain provisions of MCC may be enforced through invoking corresponding sections of other acts. For example, in some cases, it overlaps with Representation of Peoples Act 1951. In some cases, it overlaps with Indian Penal Code 1860. And so, there is no particular separate law for the enforcement of Model Code of Conduct, but it mainly depends on Election Commission how it chooses to enforce various provisions of Model Code of Conduct. So what are the provisions of Model Code of Conduct? First and foremost, there is a complete ban on transfer and posting of government officials. Ministers cannot summon government officials. The government cannot advertise at the cost of public exchequer. So if party A is in power, they cannot advertise on behalf of the government. They have to use party funds for that. No appeals can be made on the grounds of religion. There is complete prohibition of canvassing within 100 meters of polling stations. So you can see that if you deploy all these and enforce them literally throughout the election, you can ensure that the party which is in power cannot misuse the provisions of Model Code of Conduct. This last article for discussion has appeared on editorial page. India's DPI or Digital Public Infrastructure, where the author contends that there is more to be tapped in the country's digital public infrastructure, which has paved the way for greater economic freedom for citizens. India Stack, which is the name for a set of open APIs and digital public goods that aim to unlock the economic primitives of identity, data, and payments at population scale. Although the name of this project bears the word India, the vision of Indian Stack is not limited to one country. It can be applied to any nation, be it a developed or an emerging one. And so the project was conceptualized and first implemented in India, where its rapid adoption by billions of Indians and businesses has helped promote financial and social inclusion and position the country for the internet age. If you look at the evolution of the technology, in 2019, Unique ID Authority of India or UIDAI was formed. In 2010, first Aadhaar card was issued. This acts as a foundation of DPI. In 2011, NPCI launched Aadhaar Payments Bridge and Aadhaar enabled payments to channel government subsidies directly into Aadhaar linked bank accounts. In 2012, UIDAI launched eKYC, which brings Know Your Customer cost for banks down from $23 to $2.15. In 2015, CCA launched eSign as an open API allowing Aadhaar holders to digitally sign any document. In 2015, METI launched DigiLocker. In 2016, the number of Aadhaar holders crossed 1 billion. In 2016, NPCI launches UPI, a revolution in real-time mobile payments. In 2018, the number of mobile payments made using UPI crosses 1 billion. In 2021, UPI launches transaction volume crosses $4 billion. So we can see that 67 billion transactions were conducted, 5.47 trillion rupees of transactions were done. Total volume of monthly real-time mobile payments have reached 2.8 billion, and there are 4 account aggregations. And so if you look at the significance of the infrastructure that we have created, it has shaped a unique partnership between governments, which is union and the state, regulators, private sector, selfless volunteers, startups and academia think tanks. It has engendered or begetted sustained collective action at scale between many disparate entities itself, making it superior to Web 3. It creates a superstructure which delivers consistent, affordable, and across the board value to citizens, government, and corporate sector. It ensures efficient execution of over 1700 union and state government schemes by enabling end to end identification and distribution. It promotes rapid adoption and attendant to visible ease of doing business in day to day transaction for citizens through voluntary usage for various private sector applications. And so you can see that there are a lot of significance of creating such an infrastructure.